You know those topics that you're not supposed to talk about, like in polite company, quote unquote, sex, politics, religion, those types of things, money, even though that last one is held up by the patriarchy, but we're going to let that go for right now. Another thing that we don't like to talk about is trauma, especially trauma to vulnerable populations like children, and what that trauma does and how and what our role could be in alleviating the pain of others. In polite conversation, we often stick to the weather and happy things and reality TV shows and what could pass as pleasing, but doesn't have the impact. And today we're going to change that a little bit. Today we're going to have an impactful conversation with Dr. Pamela J. Pine. Dr. Pamela J. Pine, PhD and Master's in Public Health, has been an international health development and communication professional throughout her adult life, supporting the lives of poor and otherwise underserved groups with a 2-decade specialty on preventing and mitigating child sexual abuse, CSA, and other adverse childhood experiences, ACEs. She is also a professor, best-selling author, and a multimedia artist. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the stories that we tell ourselves to not get involved in the trauma of others, especially of children and otherwise more sensitive populations. And we're going to talk about how to change that story using Pamela's example. Pamela is not a victim of child sexual abuse, but she heard the stories in her work and she got involved. So if you have a nagging within you to be more involved in someone else's story and you just aren't sure how or what or who and how to bust through those limiting beliefs that are holding you back, then my friend, this episode is for you. All right, let's go.
Welcome to the Flourishing Entrepreneur Podcast with Alea Harris. If you're looking for actionable ways to overcome communication and differentiation challenges by sharing radically authentic stories, you are in the right place. Listen in and learn how to stand in the power of your unique narrative to transform your personal life, business, and workplace culture. And now, your host, award-winning international speaker, strategic storytelling consultant, and Japanese whiskey lover, Ruby Coral's mom, Alea Harris.
Hi, Pamela. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Flourishing Entrepreneur Podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Getting better all the time.
I love that. I love to hear that. Before we dive into some of our questions, can you tell the people who you are and what you do?
Sure. My professional name is Dr. Pamela J. Pine. There's actually another Dr. Pamela Pine in California, so I use my initial. And I am the director of Stop the Silence, a department of the Institute on Violence, Abuse, and Trauma. And I work on the prevention and mitigation of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, including child sexual abuse, child physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, and a number of other adverse childhood experiences.
Wow, what meaningful and important work. How did you get into that work?
Yeah, well, I'm by background and training, I'm an international public health development and communication specialist. And 25 years ago now, I was sitting at the agency where I was working in Washington, D.C., and across my screen came some information from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And I looked at it, and it was a call, very, very early call, 25 years ago, very, very early call for robust research in interpersonal violence. And it had bullying as a focus, and child abuse and elder abuse and domestic violence. My sister had been a therapist in California and had gotten a name for herself of being able to work successfully with survivors of child sexual abuse. So I began there. And I'll tell you, I started reading and I couldn't stop. And I've never stopped for 25 years because the numbers that child sexual abuse are represented in terms of girls and boys in the United States alone, 1 out of 4 girls, 1 out of 6 boys, and the impact on their lives. But then as they became adolescents and they became adults and their families are affected and their communities are affected, it was overwhelming. And I had had a lot of education up to that point, and most of it in public health without one course in childhood trauma. So I felt something needed to be done, and well, it might as well be me. So I started an organization. Stop the Silence was a freestanding organization for 20 years before we joined the Institute on Violence, Abuse, and Trauma, or IVAT. And we worked on advocacy, education, and training, and policy development and reform. And then everything was transferred over to IVAT, and I became the Stop the Silence director there. So that's the short version, even though it's probably too long. I was impassioned. The way I explain it is that the issue took me rather than me taking it.
I can see that. And I also want to give you huge credit because a lot of people will see something's wrong and then say, oh, I sure hope somebody fixes that. And you said, I'm going to go and be part of the solution, which is huge. And that really boils down to the stories we tell ourselves about what we are capable of and what we can do in the world. I mean, how do you feel that the stories that we tell ourselves impact our trajectory in life? And how have the stories you've told impacted the trajectory of your life?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I think that the trajectories of my life and the stories that I tell myself are ourselves. The stories that we tell ourselves are critical. I was really supported as a kid. I mean, I was one of the lucky kids. My family was far from perfect. Well, they weren't perfect. They were pretty darn good, but they weren't perfect. But I had parents and a situation and a community that supported me in pretty much everything that I took up to do, whether it was science or art or music or whatever it was. So I was able to move forward in a positive manner. Not that my life has always been easy, not that I haven't had my struggles, but it has moved forward overall in a positive fashion. And I was able to learn from the struggles. The stories that we tell ourselves, just to touch on that for a moment, are absolutely critical. They're almost everything besides what we're given physically, food and water and housing and all that kind of stuff. But what do we tell ourselves about ourselves? Am I a good person? Am I a moral person? Am I ethical? Do I do things well? Am I smart? Am I capable? Am I skilled? All of those things are so important to how we think about ourselves. And all those things I was told I was okay in when I was a kid. And that's the start of it all. That childhood stuff is the start of it all, I think.
And you're helping children have better, less traumatic stories so that the start of it all doesn't end up informing or changing the trajectory of their lives, which I think is incredibly powerful. But I want to know, as you've been telling this empowering story to yourself, obviously, because you are in motion, actively doing good work in the world, there have to have been times where you succeeded and you labeled something as a success and you labeled something as a failure. All of those are still part of the story we're telling ourselves because we have different measures of success and failure. But how do you use those concepts within your own story. And can you give us an example of what that looks like?
I can. I've been relatively, I think, I believe, I feel about myself, I've been relatively, and often extraordinarily successful. And I'm really happy and I'm proud of that. And it's carried me forward. And as important, I think it's allowed me to do good work in the world and affect other people's lives. But certainly failure is a part of all of our lives. And two things come to mind. One is a time when I was working in Morocco. I'm an international public health specialist, and I've worked all over the place. And I was living and working in Morocco. And there was this wonderful project that it was a team of two, me and another American, working with Moroccan women. We had developed this micro enterprise program and allowed women who were a part of the program to supplement their family's income. They had never worked before. Most of them had not been to school. And we developed both a beautiful, I mean, gorgeous doll making business that ultimately were exported to the United Nations, and an apiculture beekeeping business. Now, these are women who had never been out of their communities, and we were trekking them, like 20 miles so that they could work with their hives and the bees. They made their own costumes, and it was fantastic. But the US government decided not to continue to fund it. And I was really distraught because it did so much good for these 50 women. And I saw it as possibly going all over Morocco. So it didn't feel good, but I learned how to take that in stride and move it forward, and learned lessons about what I needed to do for a next project to make sure that the core and the base is there. But another example is a really personal one. And that is that there are people who have been in my life, and I always thought, and I was taught actually, that it was really up to me to make sure that the relationship flourished. And if anything went wrong, somehow, somewhere, it was both partly my fault, but also my responsibility to fix. That has very recently changed, really recently. And it is a freeing idea. It's not all up to me. I can try my best, but I can also let go. And that's an important lesson as well.
Wow, I can try my best, but I can also let go. I repeated it because a lot of the times people hold on to their failures and they allow them to beat them up, and without saying I try my best, I'm going to let it go. It's there's this parable where basically, I'm going to shorten it, in good times and in bad times, the best thing to say is this too shall pass, because the good passes and the bad passes, but you just need to keep going and you'll get more of the good and you'll get more of the bad. But it's the experience of moving through all of it and what you gain from that experience that really matters. So I love that what you said, do your best and then let it go, not take responsibility for things that are not your responsibility. When you do that, it sounds like you've had to overcome a lot of limiting beliefs to make that happen. What were or / are your limiting beliefs? And can you tell us a story of how they have held or currently hold you back and the tools you use to overcome them?
Yeah. The limiting and very profound and important limiting belief to me has to do with what we just spoke about. And that is that it's my responsibility. I mean, I was taught that. I was taught that it is up to me to make sure that everybody is okay, that everything is working as it should, that if somebody gets upset, somehow it's my fault on some level and responsibility. That was truly limiting because you can't let go then. And you're still sitting in the muck, and you can't get out of the muck unless you're able to understand how to walk and walk from it. And this is really recent. I'm honestly, Leah, this is really recent for me. And what helped me, it wasn't a person, it was time, as you just said. It was father or mother time, call it call it what you will, but it was the process of letting myself both heal and understand and move forward. They're complicated. They're complicated concepts, but that's, I guess that's what I want to say right now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I don't require any more. You've said quite a lot of good things I think that people can relate to. And I think that, that's why I asked the question in the way that I did about what limiting beliefs did you or are you currently holding? Because sometimes they go away completely and sometimes they go away a little bit, then they come back, then they leave, then they come back. And the
Right.
story continues. So I think that whatever you have to say about it at this moment is a good thing to say about it at this moment. But I have complete faith that, as you're saying, the recent things and the recent changes will change your perspective, will change how you approach your life. And as you keep going, you will see yourself and see life in a different way. And so when you're gone, imagining that you stay on this same trajectory of development, and you continue to refine the story you tell you to yourself and others, what story do you want people to tell about you when you are gone?
I used to joke with friends actually and say on my headstone, I wanted to say she tried really, really hard. and 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 I guess that is what I want people to know. I mean, I want I would like people to believe that I was honest, sincere, true, solid, and worked my butt off for the right things and accomplished making the world at least a little bit better, both for others as well as myself. The other thing that I'd like people to think about me, remember about me, is I looked for the beauty and sometimes found it.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. I love you have so many good one-liners, Pamela.
Thank you.
You're good at this. You are good at this. So if you right now could ask the universe for something and be 100% sure that it would manifest, what would it be and why?
It would be to make the work that I've worked very hard to accomplish and bring to fruition for a very long time take huge wings. We're currently working on and have been, but we have some new things coming that are in process. We have been working for a very long time on trying to spread the word about child sexual abuse and other adverse childhood experiences. And it's not an easy sell, so to speak. It's really not. I mean, 25 years ago, I used to joke that I could clear a cocktail party in 5 minutes. Ask me what I did, right? Ask me what I did, and everybody would walk away from me. That's changed. Our advocacy education and training programs are geared to reach a large section of many populations. Just like with breast cancer and just like with HIV/AIDS, if we don't take a hold of these issues and make a concerted effort to understand them and personally and communally act, it ain't going to get better.
So if someone is listening to you and they're feeling some of that Dr. Pamela J. Pine energy, and they're like, I am not just going to sit here and listen to the problem. I want to be part of the solution. How can they get involved?
Absolutely. All kinds of ways. I mean, they can learn more about it personally, and I'll be happy to talk to anybody. Please feel free to reach out, Pamela P, P-A-M-E-L-A-P, at ivatcenters.org. They can look at our website, which is ivatcenters.org/stop-the-silence. They can learn about these issues by signing up, registering for the online education program that we have. And they can reach out to me to find out more about that. It's also on our website. And they can also, when they learn more, they can involve their families and communities in education and training so that this is not a one woman or one man or group process, but it is a recognized focus for their community and, frankly, the world. So that's what we're after.
I love it. Yes. Let's let the passion continue for such a wonderful and worthy cause. I appreciate the work that you are doing. I am still at the cocktail party with you. You haven't cleared me out. I'm
That's great.
Listening and supporting. If you had to leave our dear listeners with any last thoughts or final words, what would they be?
That you can make a difference. And no matter how small you get involved or how big, the difference that you can make even in one life, of whether it's a child or a healing adult, is enormous. Maybe if you engage on learning more, you'll be able to do that really, really well. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. It just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of commitment.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Pamela J. Pine, for joining us. I have loved listening to you, learning from you, and kind of just getting some of your passion through osmosis. We need more people like you in the world who see something and do something about it. So thank you for your work. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you sharing your time with us today.
I appreciate you. And as I told you, even before we got on here, your questions are lovely and brilliant and really soul focused. And I appreciate that. It made me dive a little bit.
Good.
And I was appreciative of that. I really was. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And my work here is now done. I have gotten someone to dive into themselves today. Check.
Yeah.
At least one person. Well, thank you so much, Pamela. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. You take good care. Have a nice day.
So I have a challenge for you. Now that you've heard from Dr. Pamela J. Pine and you've seen how the span of her career has been dedicated to helping a cause that she felt struck her in her core, what are you going to do? What cause, what population, what group, what support can you provide? They say if you see something, say something, but I challenge you, if you see something, do something. What story do you need to tell yourself? What story do you need to change to move yourself into action? So you're not just a passive viewer of someone else's story of crisis, trauma, and pain, but you become their guide, their help to help them change their story and achieve their own success. Just like every week here on the Flourishing Entrepreneur Podcast, my name is Alea Harris, and I'm sending you lots of love, light, and abundance. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Flourishing Entrepreneur Podcast with Alea Harris. Vibing with what you hear? Leave a 5-star review to spread the love, and be sure to click subscribe. We wish you love, light, and abundance. See you next time. Thank you.